Now, the government of Burma is digesting a stern message from William Hague, the first British Foreign Secretary to visit the former British colony in half a century. After he had a second meeting with the pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi, Mr. Hague said the Burmese government must make significantly more progress towards freedom and democracy before the European Union would even consider lifting sanctions. Well, Mr. Hague spoke to BBC World News from Burma, and he told us he agreed with Aung San Suu Kyi's assessment that the president is sincere in his support for reform.
Well, I think that the president is sincere when he says, and as he said to me yesterday, that progress towards democracy is irreversible. I think he does mean that, and he, of course, has taken part in the important dialogue with Aung San Suu Kyi that has led to many of the improvements that have already taken place. But like any government in the world, it is not monolithic. There are a variety of views. There will be within the government here a great variety of views about the pace of reform, about the way in which the country opens up. So it is still possible for it to lose momentum or lose direction. And that's why it's important for them to have a clear message from visitors like me and from Hillary Clinton, who was here last month, about what the conditions are attached to our closer cooperation with this country in the future.
Well, the BBC's Rachel Harvey is in Rangoon reporting on the British Foreign Secretary's visit, and she is also getting a taste of how life is changing dramatically on the streets of Rangoon.
The atmosphere, the mood on the streets here in Rangoon has changed dramatically in the past year. When I've come here before, people have always been very polite, very friendly, but there's also been a wariness, fearfulness that speaking to a foreigner might land them in trouble. But now people are beginning to believe that the changes that have begun in this country might actually be for real. William Hague has said he believes that there is a genuine momentum to these reforms and that the government is sincere about its desire for change. Aung San Suu Kyi said she is confident that a process is now underway. It's a question, though, of where it's all going to lead, how far those reforms might go, because there are still sanctions in place. And although William Hague has talked about the potential that Burma has if this trend continues, unless there's big investment, unless the economy picks up, ordinary people aren't going to feel the benefits. But sanctions won't be lifted until there are more concrete steps towards reform. That has been the clear message from William Hague. That is also the clear message from other visiting diplomats. So the idea is to try and continue the pressure on the new government, to try and encourage and cajole them to continue on the path they appear to have gone down, at the same time as supporting Aung San Suu Kyi and ensuring that she is on board with everything that the outside world is doing, so that ultimately there can be more investment, there can be more opportunities in Burma for ordinary people.
Rachel Harvey there in Rangoon, and in a few minutes here on The Hub, analysis of how Burma's civilian president and largely military government still are handling reforms and the Western pressure for more. The parents of the Indian civilian-led presidency and government are moving reforms in the right direction. Much more must be done. Part of the concern comes from what visiting foreign leaders like the British Foreign Secretary William Hague are told about commitments to reform, as in yesterday's meeting. Then what emerges afterwards? Mr. Hague emerged saying he received commitments on releasing political prisoners. Then later, the Foreign Minister, Wun Amoyluin, told the BBC Burmese service the only prisoners in Burma following 3 releases are now criminals. The Foreign Minister said there are no political prisoners or prisoners of conscience as far as we are concerned. Well, joining me now to discuss this further is Min Sway from the BBC's Burmese service. Min Sway, what do you read into this? The fact that you have the British Foreign Secretary emerging saying things are moving in the right direction, they are sincere. Then you have the Foreign Minister saying, no, we have no prisoners or political prisoners anyway.
I think that this is a very tricky question. The Burmese government throughout doesn't recognize there are political prisoners, but they said these are people who has committed crimes or they are detained because of these legal actions. So, in fact, even if the term of reference of political prisoners cannot be accepted, then there's a very sort of vast difference what the world wants them to change and what they have in mind. Sometimes in the parliament, the MPs talk about prisoners of conscience, and recently President Thein Sein said there was no political prisoners with the reporters in ASEAN. So they stick to this point, and if they cannot come into terms with political prisoners, I think there's a very difficult position to deal with the foreign community.
Do we have a difference and a problem of language here? When you have a foreign minister actually telling your BBC Burmese service in the way he did, there are no political prisoners or prisoners of conscience, do you think that's something like those like William Hague or Hillary Clinton or the Japanese foreign minister recently really understand?
In fact, the term of reference is regardless of whether they are political prisoners or not. But these people are detained because of the political activity. So the main thing is not because of the terms of reference. They don't want to admit that there are people who are repressed for their political thoughts.
But let me press you, if I may. Do we therefore have a serious problem here? Because if reforms are moving in the right direction and the Burmese government believe they're moving in the right direction, but the foreign governments are saying, no, you've got to release many more political prisoners, particularly before the election, then there's a real rift emerging here.
In fact, we can say that there are differences of opinion even between the sort of leaders in Burma. Some, they want to go quickly for the political reforms as the world has desired, but some want to drag their feet. So there are difference of opinions, and if you look at this particular question about political prisoner, we have to wait and see how they can lead the country out of these problems.
Min Sway from the BBC's Burmese service, thanks very much indeed for joining me here on The Hub.
Thank you very much.
There is
a Turkish court has ordered
significant change underway in Burma today.
I think that is now the consensus that's being reached. The key questions are how far those reforms will go, whether they are limited in scope and ambition, or whether this is the beginning of a process that will ultimately lead to true freedom and democracy. William Hague has today held further talks with Aung San Suu Kyi and other senior leaders of her party. He emerged from those talks at her house, the villa on the lakeside in Rangoon, where of course she was held in detention for so long, but now plays host to foreign dignitaries. He came out saying again that he believes the process of reform is real, that there is a momentum now for change, but he also warned of the risks that were inherent in engaging with the government now. As he put it, there is still much work to be done, so we shouldn't release the pressure too soon. But he also spoke of the possibility that perhaps the long-cherished dream of so many people here, including, of course, Aung San Suu Kyi and other pro-democracy activists, have held for so long. And he was at pains to praise Aung San Suu Kyi for her dedication and hard work in bringing Burma to this point.
Now, William Hague also suggested that sanctions upon Burma could be lifted if the process of reform continues. What are the stumbling blocks? For instance, what's the position on political prisoners?
Well, political prisoners is an absolutely key issue, not just for Britain, but also for its European and American partners and others around the world. There have been some prisoner releases over the past year since this new government took power, but there are still several hundred prisoners of conscience who remain in detention. And at every opportunity, William Hague has repeated his demand that all those prisoners should be set free. He says he has had an assurance that that will happen, but he also said that he judges the government by its actions, not its rhetoric. So yes, that is a key stumbling block. Also, the continued conflicts in ethnic minority areas. The government is trying now to start a process of peace talks. Some of those are bearing fruit, others are proving more problematic. There are also issues of bringing a more inclusive process together, of trying to keep these reforms moving. That the key really is that the outside world wants to see the trend continue, even if the pace slows and changes, that the direction of travel is true and is in the direction of democracy. That is what William Hague wants to see, that's what Aung San Suu Kyi wants to see, and crucially, much of the outside world takes their cue from her.
Rachel Harvey in Rangoon, thanks.